Hello. So we've just heard in the last couple of minutes that the Scottish Government have approved a bid to host the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow in 2026. This came after they had a meeting yesterday with the Australians, Commonwealth Games Australia, and managed to secure just a little bit more cash because the one thing that was stopping them from going for these games full throttle for the last couple of months is the thought of having to spend any taxpayers' cash, but they are now pretty confident that they can put on these games, albeit scaled back, without having to spend a penny of, maybe the odd penny, maybe a few pennies of taxpayers' cash. But Susan Eaglestaff, Herald sports writer, former Commonwealth Games athlete, are you excited at the prospect of watching Josh Kerr take on Jacob Ingebrigtsen in Scotstoun in 2 years' time?
I'm not sure Ingebrigtsen will be there. He's Norwegian, so unless they sneak into the Commonwealth,
fair enough. Yeah, that'd be.
But yeah, I mean,
that'd be bigger
really
news.
split on this. I'm really split on this. I mean, there's huge positives to the Commonwealth Games coming back to Glasgow, but there's also real significant negatives, I think, or real significant downsides. I mean, the massive positive is by a Commonwealth Games in 2026 going ahead, it pretty much secures the future for the Commonwealth Games, at least in the short term, because the real danger had been if a host couldn't be found for 2026. In my opinion, that would have been the end of the Commonwealth Games. I don't think we would have seen a Commonwealth Games again, and that would have been a real shame. But what my real worry is, how can Glasgow do a good job of this? You know, the city has got, you know, kind of a shade over 18 months to prepare for this. You know, major sporting events like this are usually awarded to host cities something like 7 years in advance.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. It's because that's how long it takes to put on a really successful event of this size. And I know 2026 will be scaled down massively, which it has to be, because logistically it just wouldn't be possible to put on something similar to Glasgow 2014. But I worry that, you know, because Glasgow 2014 is still so fresh in so many people's memories, people will be comparing 2026 to 2014, and it can't live up to 2014. And my worry is it could be a letdown, because it's not possible to make it a similar success as Glasgow 2014 was, which I think most people in the city and most people in Scotland would agree was a total triumph for Glasgow and triumph for Scotland.
Christy Dorsey, our business correspondent, how have we got here? I mean, this is because it's been quite the route to get to the point where Glasgow is now going to be hosting the games in 2026.
Yes, well, I mean, it was originally meant to be Edmonton. Then they couldn't get their finances together, so it went to Durban, and Durban couldn't get their finances together either, so it went to Victoria. It's all really like a kind of shoddy game of pass the parcel. So here we are. Glasgow's got it now. And as Susan pointed out, with a very scaled back version. But as she rightly says, that's going to be, I mean, the budget, I believe, is 150 million, round about that. Is that right? So yes, it's not going to be the show that we saw in 2014 by any stretch of the imagination.
Because I think if you bear in mind the budget for Glasgow 2014 was roughly 550 million, and that was a decade ago. I mean, the budget for 2026 is minuscule in comparison, and that's why it's just going to be so hard to produce something of a similar quality.
Well, I mean, Birmingham, the last one in Birmingham was 870 million. So that gives you an idea of kind of the escalation. Of course, we've had surging inflation over the last couple of years. So, you know, the cost of everything has gone up. So that 150 million is really a drop in the bucket compared to what's gone before.
Well, this is the point with Victoria and Australia. They were in the billions, weren't they, when they were sort of looking at how much it was going to cost?
Yeah, Premier Daniel Andrews claimed, the Commonwealth Games Federation begged to differ, but he claimed that the cost could be as much as 6 to 7 million Australian dollars, which is about a little bit more than £3.5 billion. That's a huge amount of money. That's a huge amount of money for anybody to come up with. And they really don't want to. I mean, there's a lot of politics at play in Victoria as well. You know, nobody wants to be seen as the face of a debt-laden games legacy. So, you know, better to pull out now, I suspect, than wait until it was impossible to get out.
I mean, it's only actually through Victoria's withdrawal that this is even happening at all, because Victoria had to pay £100 million to the Commonwealth Games Federation in compensation for pulling out, which the Commonwealth Games Federation are going to give to Glasgow to put towards staging this Games in 2026, because without that, it just wouldn't happen.
We're talking about the scaled back games. Susan, do we know very much about how scaled back it's going to be? What are we losing?
Well, we don't know,
Okay.
because that's one of the huge problems is we've got basically 18-20 months to make these massive decisions. So in Glasgow 2014, there was 18 sports on the programme. There's going to be in 2026 between 10 and 13 sports on the programme. The only ones that are guaranteed so far are athletics and swimming. It's been suggested there will only be 4 venues used. So 2 of those venues will be Scotstoun for the athletics and Tollcross for the swimming. And, some of those venues, I mean, Scotstoun obviously hosts Glasgow Warriors rugby team, week to week. So my guess is the Rugby Sevens would also go there in 2026.
Sure.
You could shuffle the schedule so they could both work there. Rugby Sevens is also quite commercially viable and quite commercially attractive to a lot of sponsors. Yeah. My guess is rugby would be in, but I think it's going to be a real bun fight in the next year and a half for each sport to really try and prove they're worthy. And there's going to be so many kind of political aspects to the decision of which sports to put onto the programme, because a sport like hockey, a team sport, hundreds of athletes, that's not very attractive, for a games which is massively scaled down. Whereas some of the other sports, say for example judo has got many fewer athletes. I mean, I don't know, would the hydro be used? That's obviously, it's a great venue, but the problem is the hydro is very likely to be booked out in the summer of 2026. So, where does that leave, who would be able to cancel it? What would be the compensation owed if you cancel, other things that are booked in the hydro? That's what's going to be so difficult to work out. I mean, I would assume some of these conversations have been had already, but it'll be interesting to see, how quickly real concrete announcements start to get made about these kind of decisions.
Another big question is where are all these athletes going to stay, which might be another thing that factors against the big team, some of the bigger team sports.
Yeah,
there's not going to be an athletes village in the same way that there was an athletes village in Glasgow 2014. There was a custom built athletes village in Kilmarnock. That won't happen this year.
Yeah, those properties have been sold off. So
of course they can't stay there, but there will definitely not be a custom built athletes village for 2026. They'll probably stay in student accommodation. Obviously, it's during the summer. Universities won't be in. It's definitely a possibility, student accommodation. The real problem with that is, for the athletes, is that takes away a lot of the magic of the games. And certainly from my experience, one of the best things about a multi-sport event, and this is Commonwealth Games and Olympic Games, one of the very best things is staying in the athletes village, and that will be taken away. But it needs must, and if it's the only way to make a games go ahead, then without an athletes village, then that's just what has to happen.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's I think 7,000 athletes and officials all came over for the 2014 games. So I don't know, there's a lot of hotel rooms, but obviously it's obviously being scaled way back. But I wonder if there's going to be any tension there between the logistics of going, okay, well, we're not going to take any big teams, but also because, as we said, it's 150 million. Now, 100 million of that is coming from Victoria, but the other 50 million is going to be through commercial sponsorship. And for commercial sponsorship, as you kind of mentioned just a minute ago there, Susan, there are certain sports which are possibly more commercially attractive than other sports. So is that going to be a factor in how they decide as well? Or are they going to go, well, there's only 3 people in this team, whereas there's 20 people in this team, but we'll sell more tickets. I mean, these are difficult decisions.
It's really difficult decisions, and it's going to be a real balancing act over the next few months, because bearing in mind these decisions need to be made pretty quickly, because most sports have at least a year long qualifying period. So really these decisions need to be made, by early 2025, and they need to be confirmed so the athletes know what they're doing, the sports know what they're doing. And it will be really difficult. How do you decide which sport is of more value than others? I mean, these decisions are always made. A Commonwealth Games only has, a handful of core sports that must be included at each games, and then the host city gets to decide the remaining sports on the programme. So there is always this kind of conversation. For example, Glasgow 2014 included judo because Scotland are very good at judo, and that hadn't been in the programme since Manchester in 2002. So there is always sports that come in and out, but the Commonwealth Games is more valuable to some sports than it is to others. You know, for example, a sport like netball, which isn't in the Olympic Games, the Commonwealth Games is huge for netball. And if netball is left out, that's a massive blow. But netball, you know, netball will run for the whole entire length of the Commonwealth Games. Does that make it less attractive compared to, I mentioned rugby sevens, which will be only 2 days long? You know, it's things like this that will have to be weighed up, and as it's going to be a real fine balancing act, making the decision which sports are included.
Absolutely. I saw some sort of suggestion that maybe the marathon wouldn't be included. But of course, this would be Eilish McColgan. This would be her discipline maybe in 2026 as well. So that feels like...
certainly, she's looking to move into the marathon very soon. So yeah, I'm sure she'd be targeting the marathon. The problem with these road events is there's, you know, it's logistically, it's so complicated.
Yeah.
And there's also been suggestions there won't be any cycling road races for exactly that reason, because to close roads, you know, not just within the city, for, you know, around Scotland, around the Central Belt, is a massive undertaking, and I'm just not sure there's the capacity to do that. So it's likely that all the sports that are included will be, you know, like confined within stadiums or within arenas, because it's just much easier to manage those kind of events.
Yeah. Christine, I mean, this must be good news for the city. We're going to have, you know, thousands of people coming here, millions watching on TV, but thousands here spending money in all the shops and our hotels and stuff. It's going to be good for the economy, isn't it?
To an extent, yes. With the scaled back venue, you really can't expect. Just double checking here my notes. What was it again? Hold on. It was okay. Yes, here we go. You know, the economic boost in 2014 for the single year was 73 million. For the 2007 to 2014 period, the economic impact was 740 million. Wow. 390 million of that was direct to Glasgow. You can't expect those sorts of numbers again on a event where the number of games are being scaled back, the events are being scaled back, and the budget's been dramatically reduced. So yes, there will be obviously some economic benefit, but how much will be the question. I guess from anybody, you know, from either the local council or the Scottish government's point of view, as long as they don't have to pay for any of it, it's all bonus. It's gravy.
Yeah. Interesting times. Thank you very much, both of you, for speaking. And I'm sure we'll probably speak again between now and 2026. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you, Andrew. Cheers.
Thanks.